Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Wired In, presented by Contech. Today, we are talking again with Marcus Manning. Thank you for joining, Marcus. We are talking today about speaking human, how to bridge the AV tech business gap. And what we mean by this is AV is a very technical skill set. It's a technical discipline. There are a lot of details you must master. And Contech, being a master of all these details, can do the work. And there are many companies that can do a good job on AV. But what makes you guys so different and so special is that you are a true partner with a lot of these executives that are making the decisions. And you're able to communicate effectively these technical details that they must understand to make good decisions, but in a way that is very human and relatable and makes them feel empowered to make those decisions. It's not like a nerd off in technical expertise where you're making them feel like they're talked down to or intimidated or overwhelmed or condescended. You really bring in your partners to help them understand what you guys are doing and talk to them in a very relatable way. So I thought this would be a great episode to talk about your principles of communication, if you will. So what we want to get across is, why is it so difficult for a lot of folks in your position to explain these complex concepts very simply? And how do you go about your approach to explaining more simply and making people feel at ease when they're working with you and dreaming big for their AV projects? So with that, Marcus, why is it so difficult for the technical chops to make their way up to the executive boardroom level? What's the challenge there?
Well, yeah, Brandon, it starts, I'd say, early on. So what happens in, I'd say, multiple industries, but anytime you're in a technology sector, there is a lot of learning that has to happen, a lot of deep diving, very, very technical concepts. But what ends up, really happening in our industry is you can't forget that we're here to serve people, right? Mm-hmm. We're here to help people bring their communication vision to life, make all these things happen. And so at some point along that journey of really trying to enhance your skills, do you lose sight of who are you actually talking to and what are you doing? Who are you here to help? Who are you advising? What are you doing? And so people almost get stuck because, I'll throw out something that's, we don't have to get into it, but it's a reality, right? As HDMI changes, everyone knows HDMI. Well, everyone may not know that there's HDMI 2.2 or there's HDMI 3.8 or just made up numbers. Well, within HDMI, there's HDCP. Well, what's HDCP? Well, it's a protocol that deals with encryption. Oh, you can only have 7 devices. Right. So you just go off on this rabbit hole of a tangent.
Yeah.
And is it important? Extremely important for making things work. Right. If all of a sudden you've hooked up some devices via HDMI and you get a green screen, you didn't, handle the HDCP correctly. However, if you're sitting listening to someone's dream about how their room's going to work, how they're going to communicate to others, that doesn't matter, right? It matters for myself or my team or anyone technical that has to design it, that has to work on it and support it. But when you're out here, just talking to other human beings, okay, so you want a display? Oh, awesome. You use PowerPoint? Great. You just want easy connectivity? You want something wireless? Right. Those are the things when you're trying to think about the scope and you're trying to translate what is that vision and now translate that into a written document so a person can easily read it in lay language and understand like, oh, yeah, this sounds great. Yep, I'm going to have a giant, bright LED panel on the wall. Yes, you will. Now it's on us on the technical side to go back and say, okay, how do you actually make this work and what has to happen? And you really have to be able to flip that switch and kind of go back and forth between just talking to normal users. And then in the same conversation, maybe you jump from users to IT staff to other AV and multimedia professionals, and then you're back to users. And you really need to be able to flow in and out of those conversations fairly seamlessly so that everyone gets what they need out of the conversation to help advance a project forward.
That's great. Okay, so if I'm understanding you right, you've got what some people call the knowledge problem, which is to say, once you start to learn or become an expert in a topic, you forget what it's like not to know about that expertise that you have. So it's hard to translate back down to where you used to be, as an expert. And so you've got this senior decision maker who's dreaming about a big project. They're wanting to spend $500,000, $1 million, $2 million on a big AV project at an organization or a hospital or a university setting. and they're thinking like, I just needed to work. Here's my vision. Here's what I need. And I know, they know the stakeholders and the challenges and the opportunities in front of them and what they need to do, whether it needs to be HDMI 2.2 or HDMI 3.0 or whatever. They don't really care. They just needed to work. But there comes a point in the conversation where I'm sure you've had this conversation 1,000 times where a dreamer will say, yeah, I want it to look like this. And you go, well, that's great. But technically, the way that we can do that, it's going to, add 30% to your budget. Or if we're going to do that, that means we got to make these decisions over here, which is not what you expected. How do you handle that conversation? Because I bet that's tricky.
It is very tricky because, you always want to respect people's area of expertise, just like you want to be respected for your own. So it's one of those things, I always try to catch it early. I don't want anyone to ever have a surprise, right? As you go through the process, no matter who you're working with, they have a fundamental idea of, a cost, what something's going to do. So the second someone's taking you down a path, and again, I'm never a fan of telling someone no early. I don't want to crush any dreams. I'm like, hey, you know what? Every dream can become a reality if you have the budget for it.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do anything, but there's a reality that you have to kind of just bring it into the conversation quickly and say, hey, that sounds awesome. And usually it does sound awesome. Like, man, these things all sound awesome. Driving a Ferrari sounds really, really awesome. Yeah. It's highly expensive. And this is the same kind of concept where someone wants something that's a 30-foot tall LED wall that's going to cover, 80 feet, and it's really for eye candy. Awesome, we can totally do it. However, do you know that the cost on that is, $200,000 plus you have an impact to your construction budget because now you have to reinforce a wall. We need more electrical. So the best advice I always give folks is, ask for that budgetary number right away and weave it into the conversation as you're hearing some of these things diverge. If there's an add-on or diverges from the core of the project, because you can still make it happen, but is everyone aware early on? Because you never want someone to get sticker shock when all of a sudden they see something on paper and they're like, oh, I had no idea it was going to cost this. That's why we're having these conversations, right? We're talking about being a partner, being an advocate where you can, and just helping people, become educated on, what's it like in the commercial AV space. This is not a big box store, so I just go out to the store and I spend $1,500 and buy something. You could, and it'll fail in like 90 days or what have you, because it's not designed to run, like commercial products. So that's the best thing, is really having a channel of open conversation for folks. So that way there's no, hidden surprises, because a project will just natively have hidden costs. And can you expose as much of that as possible so everyone goes in with the same point of reference about what a project's going to cost?
Okay, so we've got listeners here that are, executives at big companies, universities, dean, something to that effect, and let's say they're entering into discussions of like, okay, we want to have this big AV project lined up for, Q1, Q2, 2026. What do you wish they would know, or what is your advice to them if you're going to engage an AV supplier, vendor, implementation specialist like you guys ahead of those conversations, so that when you get into them, you can have a more productive conversation? You touched on some of those things, but what advice would you have for folks listening?
It's always get active early, right? Get in contact with folks. And again, you don't need to do deep financial planning early on. You can just say, hey, let's bring in someone that designs, that understands this. If you have an architect on board, have them in the conversation, right? Have all the parties come together really early on and just listen to you, hear it, brainstorm it. We have some technical things. We call, a rough order of magnitude budget, or you can do a design analysis, anything like that, just to start getting the ideas on paper. And then that gives you a framework of where we're going, but you also need to coordinate that with, an architect or a project manager or a general contractor, so that as they hear it in real time and they're interacting with what information we're giving, they can say, oh, wait, well, now I need to reinforce that wall because that thing is going to weigh 800 pounds. We have to come up with this idea, or, oh, wait, we need to add more circuits because, we need to power up 3,000 watts or, something of that nature. And that's the best advice I can give to anyone. Get your technology folks in there early in that discussion and invite others, invite IT, invite the architect, invite whoever it is that could be a stakeholder in making this thing come to life, so that everyone's on the same page really early. Some of the tougher conversations happen, if you, in my case, I've actually received a permitted set of drawings before, right? So it's basically a building has been completely designed. It's already gone out. It's been approved and signed off on by the city or whatever municipality is responsible for it. Then we get involved designing and we say, hey, we need to make all these additions for things like conduit or floor boxes to really get into the nitty gritty of how things communicate and connect. And all of a sudden you see the project costs start going up, or you see someone saying, oh, well, now we have to core the floor, or now we have to, put this behind this wall, or we didn't account for this. So the best advice I give anyone is just get someone that, is knowledgeable about that area, get them all to the table really early, and just you share your vision and let those others kind of run with making it become a reality.
That's helpful. Last episode, I think we talked about how you've got, in a presentation space, you've got a desk and somebody wants to hook up their laptop when they sit down at the desk to handle the AV setup that they might have. And you're like, well, that's great. But now we need to drill a hole in the floor that we didn't talk about. That kind of thing. I know that is tough when you're building these kind of projects. Okay, so I want to dive into this a little bit further to just give a little bit further lay of the land on the next step, say. So we've talked a little bit about the contact process, but I'm curious how you handle this, what I've been calling is a phrase I've been coming up with lately, which is like a coordination problem, which is you and your leadership team are having these kind of high level conversations with the leadership team at a prospect client. And they got this dream, you guys kind of put this vision together, you have this kind of conversation that you're talking about now. But now there's a lot more people that need to be involved once you start executing this project, from design down to implementation to support, where you have to go further and further into those technical details, the nitty gritty, and coordinate between a lot of different people. Your team, the customer's team, the architects, the designers, interior decorators, I'm sure, and how they're going to think about putting different spaces together. What's the process you would take somebody through that, okay, now that you got this high level initial brainstorming session and now it's becoming more real, you're putting designs together, you're putting budgets in place. How do you handle that process of communication, of coordinating all those different stakeholders?
Yeah, so one of the most powerful partners is the project architect, right? The architect, they natively are connected to everyone that's going to touch a project.
Okay.
And so the best thing you can make sure that happens is my technology consultant, designer, whatever term you want to use, are they linked up with the project architect and are they in lockstep? Because that way they're also going to be talking to electrical. They're going to be talking to, the MEP firm. They're talking to everyone that's going to design this building and help it come out of the ground. And then are you open with your communications, sharing documents? Some of the best architects I work with, that's all cloud-based. They're calling coordination meetings and, making sure they get you into the owner's space to make sure that the owner has communicated directly with you, because how they may hear a need is not going to be the same interpretation of how I heard it, how I feel, is what's needed, what things look like. So I think that's the strongest partnership any owner can really have, is direct to your technology person, but also with your architect, bring them together. And that helps push this coordination and this process downstream. Because behind the scenes, we're consulting, or if you're dealing with any kind of designer, well, they've got their own internal team. So they're getting all the notes and everything from the architect and pulling it all apart. And then you're dropping everything in there and then you put it all back together. And that's how you actually create your final, architectural package for whatever's going to be happening. If you have, especially in the case of a large building, a major renovation, anything like that, mission critical that everyone is partnered up through the architect.
I'm fascinated by this concept because, you like you said, you got internal, external, you got suppliers, you got manufacturers, designers, architects, all these different people that all need to know the same information, have the same kind of visibility and context on the objective of the project. And you've got cloud services, and you've got email and phone and Zoom calls and in-person meetings, and that game of telephone can get lost in translation. It's very, very difficult to do this well. And I know you guys are specialists in making this kind of a white glove type feel with, being a good partner in this process with all the people involved. You've talked before about a front office, back office approach to, maybe some of the technical, implementation team doesn't need to know every detail of the initial conversations, but they've got to know what they need to do on a very, very detailed basis. how do you internally, what kind of teams or process in place do you have when somebody's, talking to you, you get this thing in place, you start coordinating all this, and then you've got this like kind of back office approach where they've got the details they need to know to go implement?
Yeah, that's actually a great way of putting it, because, we have your folks that may be out front, right? They're just interfacing, talking to clients, listening, getting everything together. But then you have to have a process for everyone to be on the same page. So internally, any company worth their salt, we do it one way, so we do it a different way, but it's the same concept, right? So I'm not a fan of email. I always tell folks, hey, if we work in the same company, why are you emailing me? There's got to be a better tool.
What's the other way?
I don't want to be, advocate for one specifically, but you have your Slacks or your Teams or some other platform where you set up a project and you're just communicating within that project versus I'm getting 100 emails from people that I work with. Like, you're in the office with me. Don't email me.
That's fair. Okay. This is the problem of office workers everywhere. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Right. You don't want 1,000 emails that are internal and then you're trying to fish for the 2 client emails. So we try to avoid that.
Okay.
But basically it's setting up platforms, and some of that I give credit to, project managers. Project managers are like the lifeblood of really almost anything that's going to be happening, but just coming up with tools so that I'll say Teams, I'm not advocating for Teams, but say you use Teams, right? Do you set up a project? Do you have all your resources there? And now you can easily share drawings. So as soon as the architect set comes out, push it out to your team, or you get them tied in directly to the cloud instance. It's really, how do you bring people on the team forward into the discussion? Because I don't see any value in, keeping our technical assets at arm's length from the client in some cases, because they need the information. So I may say, hey, I need a secondary account set up for this person. That way they can go in real time, see all the drawings, see all the notes. So you bring them forward to the discussion. And then internally, we just talk about things. Sometimes the technical resource may say, no, you absolutely can't do that. Well, then if you're the front-facing resource, you make sure you say, okay, well, there's no such thing as you can't. So what can we do? We're not telling someone just, no, you can't do that. Or maybe a no, but, well, no, we can't do it this way, but here's another solution for you. And that's the key there, is allowing folks to have that access to the documentation, allowing them to access the project. And again, I don't want to get into a game, and no one should ever get into a game of interpretation or the old school telephone game where, it gets translated so many times and then it's misconstrued. Just bring everybody forward as much as you can in the process, and really relying heavily on just project management process to move things along, make sure the right folks have what they need, and then have that communication always flow back to client, architect, partner, whoever it is. That's the key to that is, you don't want everyone just siloed off, and so that they're missing some of the key details that they could easily get if they're just sitting in the meeting or they're directly into some cloud instance of some drawing software.
Everybody's talking about AI, and I'm curious from your perspective on the communication between technical to, let's call it, more simple language across a huge swath of stakeholders. Do you find a place for AI to help teams like yours or help a client, understand things better? Or do you guys use AI in the way that you communicate? I'm just fascinated by the way that you could, simplify communication nowadays with some of these tools.
We honestly don't use too much of it yet in our specific space, right? And so a lot of that has to do with the inner workings of AI. It would have to be trained on what we're doing. And there's not too many models right now that are really trained well and have guardrails in place to make sure that you're getting back, factual and accurate information. There's some stuff that we're kind of experimenting right now, because we're saying, hey, can we build our own AI agent? Can we specifically train it on, the AVIXA standards, which is the governing body for, audiovisual? Can we train it? And then can we set up some kind of framework to navigate through that? There's some guys that I met, they have a great podcast, and that's one of their topics is, hey, this isn't really helpful for us now, but it could be. And the biggest thing is there's so much math involved. It's always test it out, but then verify your outputs. So I'd say we don't see a ton of it now. There's also the hardware side of this, right? Where I feel like honestly everything is AI now. I think I have an AI toothbrush coming out or something. But
right, yes.
And like everything is AI, right? But you're seeing more implementations, whether it's automation or AI, and you can have that debate all day long. But say camera tracking, tuning of microphones. There are just, we'll say technologies, I won't call them all AI, but we'll just say these technologies that are rapidly evolving that do help with executing. You have cameras now that can track a person across the stage in real time, and they're almost as effective as a human operator. Will they completely replace one? Maybe not in your largest settings because, there's some real-time decisions that have to be made. And that's when you really want that human operator. And we're in the same boat as far as designing systems. We're, building out some little agents and saying like, okay, well, if I have a room, and this is just doing something really quickly with a client, I have a room, it's 50 feet to the farthest viewer, the height is 12 feet. What size display should I use? There's math we go through every day to solve that. So now we're just looking and say, okay, well, can we build an AI agent based on, the education of our industry so that it could answer that question for me, really quickly. So if I'm just walking with a client, maybe I go into my specific, tool, type it in, and it kind of spits it out to me and gives you the equation. Because, if I'm on the client side, how do you know, right? I can say all day long, hey, that room really needs a 98-inch display. As a client or any owner of a building or space that's going to invest in this, well, how do you know that? And the person should be able to tell you, well, here's why I say it's this size. So we're hoping that AI can really get there to help with some of that conversation and just some of the, the odds and ends and the tasks that you do repetitively all the time. Because I do think there's definitely a space for that as it gets further and further along, where some of those things that are really repetitive, we can kind of take that off the human plate and maybe move that into an AI instance so we can just kind of type up what we want to ask it, not bother with doing the calculations. But I'd say for right now, don't do that. For right now, it's you can check it out, but make sure you go back and verify it and make sure your output is actually correct.
Yeah. Okay, good to know. So working with Contech, we are very human forward, that we are doing these calculations, we are checking our facts, we are doing this right. I found a lot of use in Claude's AI agents. You can upload a lot of files now and kind of train it in that way and connect it to a bunch of different tools that you've got. And I know ChatGPT and others have rolled that kind of stuff out in the last few weeks. Perplexity's great, Yeah. I find that stuff really helpful, at least for a first draft, but you definitely need somebody who knows what they're talking about to read that and understand it and make recommendations.
Absolutely. You got to verify. You got to verify before you send it out.
That's right. So for any principles that you have developed over the years and how you hold meetings, create communication assets, say, documents, briefs, project proposals, either you or your team that you think other people should know, maybe, the top 3 things I've learned over doing this for, decades and I kind of figured out along the way to do it better.
Top 3, oh man, it feels like it should be a top 300, but they'll say, if we say top 3, first and foremost, I always tell folks, yes, this is for us, but really we're not here selling widgets. I'm not knocking anyone that sells widgets, but that's not what we're here to do. Yes, we're a technology firm. We work in a technology space. I am not here because I want to sell someone a camera or a display. I'm here to really listen and understand what they're trying to do. So a lot of times, meeting with clients, there's no need to talk about any specific products. And that's no knock to any of our manufacturers. We love all of our partners. We couldn't do it without them. But when we're trying to hear and listen and understand, I don't want to inject my own thoughts about, it should be this particular manufacturer, or it should be, nope. I'm just listening, understanding, make sure I get the gist of where they're trying to go, and then let that go to a designer or the appropriate person. And now that's a guide for them, and they'll select, whatever manufacturer is best for the project. I always tell folks, we are primarily manufacturer agnostic, right? We're only interested in what's the right solution to bring this dream to reality. That's it, no more, no less. So I'd say that's one of the most important lessons I've learned. I'm not here as a reseller for a manufacturer or anything like that. We're only here to help. How can we advise? How can we help? How can we serve these folks and really make this vision a reality? That's number one, first and foremost. That's why we're there, to really be advisors.
So said another way is don't get into the sausage making. Don't. Exactly. Nobody wants to know how the sausage is made. Just give me the sausage that I ordered. That kind of thing.
There you go.
Okay. Sounds good.
There you go. Also, trust other teams. Right? I am not an army of one. Right? It's not what we are here. And so we have other teams and other folks that have all these skills. That's why you assemble your teams the way you do. Every company, every organization out there, they have folks that perform very specific tasks. It's no point in me sitting here trying to open up Revit and model something. That's not my skill set. So make sure you can trust the work. Have people you can trust to do the work, but make sure you can break these projects down and then share that load across the team so that, everything works better. There's sayings, that the more eyes on a problem, the better the solution. Same kind of concept. Make sure you're breaking that work apart, bringing the technical resources you have forward. That's why they're on the team. You know, if you don't need them and lean on them, why do you have them on your team?
That's right. There's a principle of subsidiarity, which is the person at the lowest level, closest to the work, they should be the ones that are making the decisions because they know how it works. They know the details.
Yep. Sometimes I may ask questions, but I can't tell the project management team the best way to project manage every project because I don't project manage every day. Yeah. So why would I attempt to do that? If anything, hey, what are some tools that can help you? Because now those tools get put in front of the client, they become client facing, and now it streamlines the entire communication process. So that's really a lot of trust in the feedback that's coming in from the teams. That's an important one because a lot of what we have, just speaking on us specifically, we have several tools now that were rolled out. They're the direct result of just feedback coming in from teams saying, hey, this needs to work better. This takes me too long. There's too much time spent doing this. Okay, well, is there something out here that can make this process better for everyone? And if it's better for everyone internally, well, that makes us more efficient for our clients. That makes us, have a better paperwork deployment, be able to turn over things faster. They're more accurate. They kind of cut down the roadblocks in communication. So that's a huge one, is making sure you trust your teams internally and let them do their work and take that feedback in. And this one is most important probably also in terms of you have to train forever, right? And what we're doing, you need to be a avid and constant learner of things. And this isn't just in terms of technology. It could be process, it could be architectural developments, anything, in our sphere of what we're going to need to deal with. We have to constantly learn, okay, well, here's something new that came out this month. And technology is very rapid. You have some things that come and go within 90 days. Yep. So in the technology space, yes, there's a lot of learning. But as we see the need to bring in more external teams, right? We say AV, but now AV is mostly IT. So if you haven't learned IT and IT skills and networking and all these other things, how are you going to go out and have a conversation with an IT department to help bring them in on what needs to happen to bring the leader's vision to life? So I'd say, just plan on being a learner forever. Like you're going to have to constantly learn things, be able to apply new techniques, new standards, whatever it is. So that's a big thing. That learning journey never ends.
Okay, so to summarize, your three principles would be serve the client. Don't get too much into the weeds just yet. Serve the client first. Understand what they're, maybe listen to the client first would be number one.
Exactly.
Number two, trust your team. And number three, learn something new every day.
Every day. Every day.
I love that. That's awesome. Okay, any final words of advice for people thinking about large AV projects and what they might need to know regarding the communication and kind of how to navigate that project space, because it's quite a lot.
It is a lot. It's, never feel overwhelmed by it. But the most important thing that I will harp on every chance I get, activate the right people early and often. Bring people forward to the conversation. It's never too early, but there's definitely a point in time when it's too late and it's going to cost you more money on your project, or it's going to limit what's possible. So it's never too early to reach out and just have a quick conversation. Hey, I have this thought in mind. What should I worry about, or what should I look at? I wouldn't even say worry. What should I know, right? I am thinking about doing X, Y, and Z. What do I need to know that I may not know? And just have a conversation. Just start it really, really early, and then that will flow through, and you'll end up with a much smoother project.
Love that. So start early, listen to everybody, trust your team, and learn something new every day.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, Marcus, thank you. I hope this is helpful to our listeners, and I'm excited to keep going on some of these episodes. We got a fun one next week, and so we will see you then. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.